Good day, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are and whatever moment in time that you are situating yourself in conversation with us. We welcome you. The Interfaith Reparatory Justice Table of the National Council of Churches welcomes you to this moment in time so that we can explain to you who we are and what it is that we're doing. Am I praying or am I passing that to you, Keith?
I'm happy to take the baton.
Go right ahead.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Antonia. I'm Keith Swartzenjuber with the National Council of Churches. I am really happy to see you all here. We're continuing to have people come on in. If you want to put where you're joining us from in the chat, that would be great so we could welcome you. I am going to start us off today with prayer and then also with a bit of theological grounding to get us going this afternoon. So if you will join me in prayer to begin. God of justice and God of love, we give thanks for this day and this opportunity to continue to explore your word and your vision for us. We ask that you provide us the vision, provide us the energy and the impetus to reach out to those around us, to learn more about the justice that is needed in the world around us, and to activate within our own communities for your love and for the love of your people. Amen. Once again, thanks everybody for joining us. I want to welcome you, and we want to start off with just a short theological reflection. This reflection is coming from the Reparative Justice Bible Study, which the National Council of Churches developed in conjunction with Harvard Divinity School. We did several sessions over the summer, and this Bible study is available on our website to download, so you can feel free to download it and do your own Bible study within your own congregation. But we'll do one discussion here. The passage for this afternoon is going to be Deuteronomy 15, verses 12 to 15. Let me read that for you. If a member of your community, whether a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and works for you for 6 years, in the 7th year you shall set that person free. And when you send a male slave out from you, a free person, you shall not send him out empty-handed. Provide for him liberally out of your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress, thus giving to him some of the bounty with which the Lord your God has blessed you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. For this reason, I lay this command upon you today. This word that is brought to us is something that I think a number of religious communities, regardless of your particular history, can relate to. In this passage of scripture, which is a long speech Moses makes to Israel before his death, we see reiteration of God's laws and guidance on how they apply to their contemporary moment. In this passage, we see echoes of other occasions in which reparations were paid. When the Hebrews were liberated from slavery under the Egyptian Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, they received jewelry of silver and of gold and clothing, which comes to us from Exodus chapter 12. Just as God promised when he was speaking to Moses, they received bounteously as they exited their exile. The liberated Israelites did not go empty-handed. The silver and gold were restitution for their unpaid labor and suffering. Reparative justice would also help jumpstart their new lives and build economic independence in their freedom. This passage in Deuteronomy makes clear that we must respond to the failure to provide reparations for Black Americans upon their liberation and ongoing systematic plunder. This moral debt and the practical damage it has done is a liability fracturing our communities, our churches, and our country. As Reverend Peter Jared Shell articulates in Reparations, a plan for churches, we can't truly come together as one community while some of us still reap benefits from the sabotage of others. There is an order to these things, and it can't be circumvented. Justice precedes reconciliation. Reconciliation precedes community. So in order to come together, how can we begin to understand what is owed? using this as our backdrop, I wanted to dive into the current situation around reparations to provide a bit of context and framework for what our panelists will be delivering today. Within the federal landscape and within the larger political landscape, there are a couple of ways that reparations have been lived out and been sought to be enacted. The primary means has been H.R. 40, which is a bill to establish a commission to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans. This has been sponsored by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. In addition to this proposal, Representative Barbara Lee proposed a concurrent resolution that affirms that the United States owes a debt to those who have lived through slavery and been affected by the vestiges of slavery. And it also urges the establishment of a U.S. Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Additionally, Representative Cori Bush also has proposed a resolution that recognizes that the United States has a moral and legal obligation to provide reparations for the enslavement of Africans and its lasting harm on the lives of millions of Black people in the United States. There are estimates within that particular resolution of the amount needed for payment being at $14 trillion. We're going to explore today has, yes, something to do with that money, but also is something that we're looking to get into the heart, into the meat of what is happening within our own faith communities around reparatory justice and reparations. So I'd like to introduce our panelists at this point. First, we're going to hear via video from our good friend, Jarrett. Jarrett comes to us from Network. He is a policy advocate there and has been working with the Faith Table for a long time and is a very faithful advocate. Jarrett Smith has been at Network and works on human needs issues. So we'll hear from him now via video.
My name is Jarrett Smith. I'm the government relations advocate with Network Lobby. I cover many issues for the organization, but one that is really important to me and to our history at Network is H.R. 40, the reparations bill. Network Lobby is a 51-year-old advocacy and lobby shop that was started at Trinity College. Racial equity and justice are at the heart of our political ministry. We work really hard each and every day to help those communities that are the most vulnerable, especially those communities that are Black and brown. And H.R. 40 is part of that policy that we want to see enacted that would improve the quality of life, especially for Black people in this country. And over the past year, Network has worked to pray. We wrote a prayer authored by Sister Alish and my colleague, Minister Christian Watkins. We wrote letters to the White House. We asked our members to author these letters, asking the president to open his heart and to create a commission styled after the H.R. 40 bill. We worked with the Harvard Kennedy School cohort to develop a program for young people so that they could advocate on H.R. 40. Our colleague, Father Chris Kellerman, who's over at the Jesuit Conference, recently wrote a book called All Oppression Shall Cease. In this incredible piece of work, he talks about the importance of Catholic theology and reparations, that when you see a sin, you must be contrite and you must take action to make repair for that sin. And the Catholic Church was part of the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. I suggest to everyone that is watching this video to pick up this book. You will learn so much about why we are here now in this country and how slavery, the original sin, was fundamental to creating the United States. So we will continue to work here at Network Lobby to make sure that H.R. 40 is enacted either through executive order or through the United States Congress. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you for that. We appreciate Jarrett providing us that video to participate in today's discussion. I want to introduce our other panelists that are going to be sharing with us today. First of all, Thaddeus Elliott. He is the Justice and Peace Policy Fellow for the Office of Public Policy and Advocacy of the United Church of Christ. Antonia Ruth Coleman is the Program Coordinator for the Center for Reparatory Justice, Healing, and Transformation, which is a joint program of the McCormick Theological Seminary and Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. And then C.J. Wenchler, who is a legislative assistant from the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism as well. Welcome to all of you. And Thaddeus, why don't I invite you to go ahead and share any updates you have from the United Church of Christ on their efforts around reparatory justice.
All right, thank you, Keith, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So the UCC has had a long history in being a voice for reparations and reparatory justice, not just for African Americans and descendants of slaves, but looking at indigenous peoples, and particularly we have a unique history as it relates to the illegal overthrow and of the Hawaiian Kingdom and the annexation of Hawaii as well. And so more of our recent work at our last General Synod we had this past July in Indianapolis. The Synod is the representative governing body for the denomination that sets our public positions, our public witness, and policies. And we had a series of resolutions regarding reparatory justice. The first was a resolution that declared public support for HR 40, particularly the study and development of reparation proposals for African Americans. That's a call that we've had in previous resolutions, but this was the first one that publicly proclaimed that piece of legislation as a key thing that the body of the church is encouraged to support. But beyond that, we also passed a resolution calling for a new study of our church's relationship to Indian boarding schools and boarding schools of Native Hawaiians, the impact of that, of how we were complicit in cultural genocide of millions of people. And that's born out of the Department of Interior's released recent study where they released the names of 400 odd documented Dawes Act schools. And so now we're looking into our own history and our own connection and relationships to those different schools to do deeper learning of the stories of the lives impacted, to then set us up to take more substantial actions in terms of how can we do tangible repair of harm there. And we also had a resolution relating to a series of resolutions and work and conversation we've had around our relationship to Hawaii. That's much more tangible, and it is reparations to fund Hawaiian language education programs. Many of the schools, such as the Kamehameha schools, were established by our forebears of the UCC. And in that policy, they banned the speaking and usage of Hawaiian language within those schools, incorporated JROTC programs into them, and really aided in the Americanization of the Native Hawaiian people. And so that resolution really gave us the full force and a mandate to really look at funding programs from preschool age to adulthood to help restore language loss before its complete extinction. So yeah, and so part of that, we've also been having a capital campaign called the Join the Movement for Racial Justice. which seeks to raise $4 million in total to aid in our denomination's work in addressing and making racial justice real, not just within our churches, but beyond in the communities and the world that we live in. Part of that, on September 15th, we had an online symposium in commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, which one of the keynotes was survivor Sarah Collins Rudolph. Her sister Addie Mae Collins was one of the 4 girls killed in that bombing. And the point of that symposium was, how do we move from trauma into healing, with a real call to action to address Christian nationalism and racial terror. And an upcoming series that will be part of that campaign as well, going from October to November, is really looking on decolonizing anti-racism using Indigenous imagination for our future. And so we'll be drawn into deeper conversation and deeper reckoning with how our theologies or even practices, the way we discuss talking about anti-racism, can be very colonized and can be an obstacle to really creating true reparatory justice. And so the work that we're in now as a denomination is to really lay the groundwork through truth-telling, through relearning narratives, relearning our history that oftentimes may have obscured complicity in past wrongs, to really lay the groundwork so that we can be a source of transformation in the world.
Thank you, Thaddeus. Anthony, I invite you to share with us now.
Thank you, Keith. The Center for Reparatory Justice Transformation and Remediation. It is a joint initiative, again, between the McCormick Theological Seminary and the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. We're in an exciting time here for the mission for the center, or CRJTR as it is affectionately known in these parts, is that the center is unapologetic in its goal to situate faith, theology, and ministry in the public discourse. There you go. All right. Can y'all see me now? Is that better? Wonderful. So, as I was saying, that the center is unapologetic in its goal to situate faith, theology, and ministry in the public discourse on reparations, reparatory justice, and have models of a remedy to address centuries upon centuries of foundational and systemic racism grounded in faith. We are also eager to promote and advance consciousness of reparatory justice and, engender communities of practice and practitioners engaged in the reparations movement for people of African descent within their local, national, or global communities. Our primary focus is number one, public education. We are currently working on a certificated program through McCormick Theological Seminary as our piloted program to have a year-long certificate program for practice groups to come and to take journeys through a reparatory justice activity. Also, we're looking to curate resources and curriculum related to the center's mission, as well as trainings and consultative services to seminaries, churches, and other institutions. And we are also participating in the creation and implementation of public policy and models of praxis and public theological information related to the center's mission. All of that to say that we are busy. We are busy forging ahead with building relationships so that importantly, we are not focused or working in what I call the reparatory justice silo, where we're all just doing our own singular thing and not necessarily coming together. The reason why communing together with the Interfaith Table for Reparatory Justice at NCC, it is because this is an all hands on deck matter. It is an all hands on deck for us to come up with Bible studies, to come up with faith studies, to have an interreligious handbook, to build bridges instead of building walls. So, with that in mind, I would like to also, as an aside, to let you know that the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference is planning its 2024 conference, where we will have a focused interest group conversation on reparations, reparatory justice. We are currently partnering with the Illinois African Descent Commissions on Reparations, and also there is the City of Chicago Conrad Worrell Reparations Council that we sit on. And the important thing to know about these particular activities is that we are not just sitting on a council and pontificating and having conversation and being brilliant. No, we are bringing a call to action to the state of Illinois, where we are currently. And as my friend Prince Solace from the Justice League through in Lansing, Michigan, he says that Dr. Iva Carruthers, who is one of the founding executive directors for the center, she flies and I'll take the ground while she goes around and using the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference's NGO status, a non-governmental organization status, and connecting the dots across the ocean with Guadalupe, with South Africa, with Geneva and the UN, and sitting on panels and having discussions. I am on the ground building the groundswell and having conversations and putting call to actions in place so that people, the important thing right now is to make sure that reparations becomes a culture word and not a cuss word. That reparations is not something that people need to be afraid of. Reparations is something that is necessary for equity and economics and right education. In addition, and I will end with this, my favorite word so far in this work is as an SAT word, I like to call it, and it's called recipiscence. Recipiscence simply means that you acknowledge the sin or the wrong that has been committed. And once you've acknowledged that particular wrong that has been committed, you fight or do the work that is necessary to make sure that you do not go back and repeat it with the conscious intention of never going back to that particular place again. And that comes from the work that you do in your heart. So as we continue forward in this work, there's an African proverb that says, together the ants ate the elephant. May we work together in this work to have common ground and commonality, not just for Africans in diaspora, but all those who have been wronged by white domination down through the decades and centuries and years. And with that, I thank you and I give it back over to you, Keith.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I appreciate your words. Do want to keep things moving. We'll move now to CJ Weschler from the Religious Action Center. Welcome to hear your work from the Jewish faith tradition.
Thank you, Shana Tova, for those of you who may have just celebrated the Jewish New Year. I am from the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. We are the organization that stewards the social justice work of the Reform Jewish movement. I want to start with just some brief framing of the Jewish context in this work. Our Jewish texts are clear on the importance of restitution for wrongs committed, which all of our faiths share. Jewish tradition also reminds us that simply remembering the past is not enough. The Exodus narrative recounts when the Israelites were liberated from slavery, they were given some of the wealth their slave labor had created. So in this way, Jewish text very clearly recognizes material reparation for the enslavement of the Israelites was a necessary step in their ultimate liberation. And we don't limit this principle to the Exodus narrative. And further, Maimonides, who was a prolific 12th century Jewish scholar and philosopher, he took it one step further. He noted that the financial commitment must be accompanied by genuine repentance. In Hebrew, that's tshuva. So now we're in modern day. In 2019, the Reform Jewish movement became the first Jewish denomination to call for reparations. And since then, one of the biggest things the Reform movement has been involved in is the creation of a reparations toolkit through a task force that we formed in 2021. So the purpose of the task force was to create a resource for our congregations who would like to become more involved in the reparations space at the local, state, or even federal levels. Our partners have provided their comments on our draft, and we're now sending it to our internal communications team for final review. The toolkit includes introductory educational resources, case studies to see Jewish and other communities who are already active in the reparations space, resources for those who would like to connect with groups already active in their state, Jewish resources, and more. And we're excited that the completion of the toolkit is tangible. So we are planning a webinar for the Reform movement sometime around November to introduce the toolkit and answer questions for our community. Ultimately, we want our congregations to know that we are here to assist as they go on their own reparatory justice journeys. So that's what I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, CJ. Appreciate it. And I'm looking forward, even though I'm not part of the Jewish community, I'm looking forward to seeing that toolkit as well, because I don't doubt there's many useful things for many different kinds of communities that will come out of that toolkit. So we're looking forward to the release of that. We'll move now into a time of questions and further reflection. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat or in the QA feature found at the bottom of the screen as well. I want to start off just with a question for everybody. We hear about, I kind of described just at the beginning some of the efforts that are going on at a national level, and I think all of us alluded to sort of national big picture sorts of movements and things. What from your perspective, what's the most important? Is working on that national level the most important, or are there grassroots efforts that are more important? Or what are you seeing in your particular community or your tradition? What seems to be gaining traction from your perspective?
Well, if Jared was here, he would say, national HR 40, national HR 40 for certain. So not that I speak for Jared, but I think you and I have definitely worked with him long enough to know that getting things done on the federal level is important. As for the CRJTR, the Center for Reparatory Justice Transformation and Remediation, it is an educational it's a need to have an educational footprint in all spaces of theological and public education spaces. And when we say theological, we're talking about theological or faith-based schools, because the state schools, especially some places like Florida, will more than probably not want to talk about reparations in this way, but to build some type of groundswell of conversation educationally everywhere nationally. Thaddeus, you were going to say something?
I was going to say the very same thing. In terms of level of activity from a policy perspective, our office within the UCC only works on federal level actions. We don't really engage in a lot of state work. We leave that to the other settings. So yeah, so definitely getting HR 40, but also similar things. We need similar things for Indigenous people. We need similar, reparations for Hawaiians. And we've done this before. We've done it for Japanese Americans after internment in World War II. So there's a precedent for models and how we can go about this work. And I think being able to have a conversation at a national level of really what does reparatory justice look like at a larger scale, then you can fine tune it to state level context, local context, and very different communities. But I think from the UCC perspective, we have a reputation for being very progressive and kind of justice oriented, and we always try to talk about our history in the way that we were always on the right side of history. But in the case of the Native Hawaiians, what our current missions, global missions organization arm, their predecessor was the American Board for Commissioners for Foreign Missions, who were primary conspirators in the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. Like, they weren't just, like, we talk about them as the sons of missionaries that we sent there, but they were sitting on all the boards who conspired with the US government to overthrow a sovereign nation. And that's a history that we have to really embrace and lean into. And that's part of our truth telling, is like, what was the role that our denomination played into and how we've benefited from the assets and all the things that those institutions carried in to the present day. I think that's important to really be able to recognize, because then you can really address the actual harm that was done. You can really, get a proper diagnosis of the ailment, so then you can have the proper treatment plan. And so that's the work that we're doing, is really trying to contend with the way we've been complicit in white Christian nationalism, the way we've been complicit in, cultural genocide of Indigenous peoples the world over, and really embracing that so we can really, repent and really turn our focus into true repair.
Just one more thing I'll share on that question as well. It's all hands on deck. I think that has been like the theme of both of the last who spoke. And similar to at the UCC, we are more federally focused legislatively. However, especially through our toolkit, we are working through a theory of change where it starts by educating and building awareness. And that is grassroots, and that starts on the ground level. And then once we've increased that interest and awareness at a congregational level, there's more opportunities for organization at that local and regional level. And then we can start to apply that political pressure. After we've grown that coalition, we can organize widespread public support. But yes, I share what everyone else has said, and there's more energy right now than there ever has before, at least legislatively speaking. And so it's all hands on deck.
Indeed. Thank you so much, CJ. I think I would echo all those comments and associate myself with your responses to that. Good question in the chat has popped up. What are some of the church's actions that a church or a faith community can take to start this process, to begin looking at the question of reparations? What suggestions would you have to begin walking this road? What we call around NCC, we call it a journey to Jubilee. We've been using that phrase for our work in reparations. What would your suggestions be? Where should people start to begin this journey?
Keith, why don't you talk more about the reparations Bible study that you all have?
I can. In my humble opinion, if I can offer my opinion, I'm serving sort of as a moderator at the moment, but
yeah.
For me, for churches or faith communities that want to start this work, from my perspective, it begins with learning and listening. Within my own faith tradition, I am a Mennonite. And my local congregation is actually having some of these discussions about how to do reparations where we're at. We're located in Hyattsville, Maryland. And we're trying to figure out, okay, what does that look like for us? Well, the first thing you need to do is have a conversation, and try to figure out, what are we talking about when we're talking about reparations, and begin to learn about, kind of some basic terminology, basic definitions. You've heard here today that yes, money, yes, there's financial pieces to reparations, but it goes much further than just writing a check. It goes to soul searching. That is, speaking of truth telling, kind of looking into your own history. Antonia, CJ have all reached into kind of that spiritual realm of that is necessary too for reparations. So I would say if you're wanting to get started on some of this, the suggestions I would have would be the Bible study, the NCC Bible study, which is on our website. The other thing I would suggest is to go back into the webinars. We've been doing webinars with this particular group for going into our second year, I believe. If you go to the National Council of Churches YouTube channel, there are a number of YouTube videos from previous webinars that go through some of the basics of what reparations are, talks about the wealth and income gap, wealth gap in the United States, and goes over a whole host of other things. You also have, we just recently held a webinar with the Justice League of Greater Lansing, Michigan. Antonia mentioned Prince Solis, who's one of the leaders in that movement up there. It provides a good example of a local community that has taken the initiative and done some work around reparations. And it's a process. It's definitely a process. It's a relationship building process, and it's a truth discovery process. So I would say get into the Bible, look at that, have discussions over coffee or whatever within your own community there, and then begin to build some of those relationships. Look at those resources and begin to learn and become a little bit more familiar with some of the terminology and build some of those relationships. Anything else that others would suggest as far as first steps?
Yeah, I think just kind of go off of that. I think each community, depending on what level that you're working at and how you're making that community, first should look at themselves and their body. Within the UCC, we're a very diverse, multicultural denomination. But many of our congregations are very segregated, like our larger body can look very diverse, but we have churches that are predominantly Black. And so the way that they're coming at the conversations and perspective of reparations and what that looks like, that's a different starting position versus being a predominantly white church, or, we have predominantly Filipino churches or predominantly Hawaiian churches. How do you understand your place in the overall system? And I also think it's very important, as churches, we have a tendency, or people of faith, we want to respond to the hurts that are here right now. And so we see a hungry person and our first gut instinct is like, I need to feed them, without questioning like, well, why are they hungry in the first place? Or, or I fed them once and they come back and they're still hungry and I'm just going to feed them again, without going through the thought process of like, well, why is this person in a consistent state of hunger that I'm always having to respond in this way? I think that's one of the things. And so for the UCC, particularly our work around Hawaii, this has been a decades-long thing that first started with a formal apology in 1993, which was the precursor, it was the foundation for the US government's apology to the state of Hawaii for what happened. And so we made that apology and we made a list of commitments that we haven't lived into, right? So you apologize and you recognize this happened, but then how do you go and repair? And so a lot of the work in these follow-up resolutions is really looking at each one of those commitments, each one of those harms, and figuring out what do we do next. But we wouldn't be able to do that work and get at this stage where we can look at our relationship to boarding schools, look at how we can help restore Hawaiian language, how we can get land access back to Native Hawaiians. We couldn't have that level of discussion without first that initial acknowledgement, really looking at ourselves in the mirror and facing into that. So I always say that's the first place to start, is to look at your community, look at yourselves, really dig in deep. It could be in some very painful places, some very vulnerable places you may not want to face into, but to really do this work, you have to kind of build up the fortitude to look into the gaping, wound in order to really tend to it in a way that it'll heal properly.
Great, thanks for that reflection. Okay, I'll pause just a moment to see if there's any other questions or anything else that people have that they want to put in the chat or that kind of thing. I will ask one additional thing. In the next 6 months, I would say, let's say the next 6 months, what are the most important things to be aware of? What's coming up? What should we be on the lookout for in the short term here? Just so we don't miss opportunities. Are there particular things on your radar screen that you're keeping your eyes open for, or events that you may be having, or those types of things?
Yes. There's a lot. I have a former teacher that says you're not at a parking lot, Missy. So there's much happening. First of all, I want to start off later this month or next month. Is it October or November? We have the Christian Unity Gathering for the National Council of Churches. And then I don't know, I was supposed to bring this to you all this past meeting, but there is a Reparations Sunday and Sabbath that's coming up in December. That's by the Truth Telling Project. And it's generally the third Sunday of the month of December. And then in February, again, the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference is having their 21st annual conference. And I'm glad that Reparations will have a table, will have a forum, and there will be conversations. It will be here in the big city of Wynn, Chicago, Illinois, from February 19th through the 24th. So if you are brave and bold to come to Chicago in the winter, I want to invite you all to come on through. You can go to sdpconference.info to find out more information. There is also the Callie House Lecture. Callie House is the mother of the reparations movement, and that's coming up, I believe, in January. So there's a lot happening, and we will be more than happy to have each and every one of you come and enjoy. Will there be a virtual option? Yes, there is a virtual option, but there's nothing like being in the room. Where is that Alexander Hamilton play? Be in the room, where the room, yeah, that song. The room where it happened, right? You got to be in the room where it happened. So I believe that's all. Oh, there is, yeah, I feel you, Sharon. Oh, bless you. Okay, yeah, but you can reach out to Tennessee and we'll reach, and you can get to see all of the cool things that are happening. And so that you'll be in the virtual room where it happened, just as awesome as being in the room. Ashe. I think that's it. Other than there is a reparations handbook coming. So if I can just stir a little buzz about the reparations handbook, there is an interreligious reparations handbook coming. Where it's coming from, I'm not going to tell you yet, but it's coming. Okay, Keith.
That's a tease.
That's a real huge tease. Thaddeus or CJ?
I'll just reiterate again, and I'll drop a link in the chat. So our Join the Movement for Racial Justice, beginning next month. They don't have the details up, but you can go to that website to get in the loop when it gets posted. But they're doing a series decolonizing anti-racism, Indigenous imagination for our future, October, November, completely online. And will be accessible, but we'll be thinking about kind of, going through our thought processes and the way we talk about to really lay the foundation, to give you some language and some tools and some perspectives of how to have these conversations in your faith communities. They're open to everyone, and this website in general has a lot of good resources and stories from different clergy and faith communities on how they're approaching reparatory justice and racial justice, and all of that as well. And then I guess to put on your radar, kind of like out in the world and not necessarily in our faith communities, we're looking, there's going to be another COP happening soon. And so thinking about reparations as it relates to climate justice and disaster recovery, and how that can be a form of reparations beyond just our American context. Again, us in the UCC and Hawaii, we're very concerned about the recovery efforts in Lahaina. We have a number of historic churches there. But how that can lead to a lot of dispossession and displacement of Native Hawaiians even further, and how those monies are distributed, who has the capacity to rebuild after a disaster. And this is something that's much broader throughout the rest of the Pacific and so much. So just kind of putting that out there is that there's a much more international focus and lens that we can look at reparatory justice that relates to our earth and our climate and things beyond just not what happened in the past in our history, but current harms happening in the present and could be happening in the future.
Great, thanks Thaddeus for that. I'm not seeing any more questions, so why don't we go ahead and wrap things up. I would love to welcome Antonia, if you want to say a short prayer just to close up this space and to send us on our way into this work in the world, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Now, thank you for all of each and every one of you for coming and joining us in this brief moment of us telling you our stories and telling you what we're doing and how we would like for you to go ahead and partner with this. Keith, can you put down the contact information of where the people can sign up if they want to come and join the Interfaith Reparatory Justice Table? I don't know.
You can send out that information, yes.
Yeah, okay, awesome sauce, thank you. So I'm going to close how I close pretty much just about anything. May the cloud by day and the fire by night go before you to make your ways safe, easy, successful, peaceful, prosperous, abundant your way. That is my prayer. I send you forth in love. I send you forth with grace. I send you forth in power, and I send you forth in the mind of going for reparatory justice. Blessings and Asha.
Amen. Thank you.